Hello, friends. My name is Andrew Sweeny from Parallax, and this is a quick plug for what we are up to and how you can participate in or support our activities. Firstly, me and Tom Amark are developing Parallax Academy. We have several fantastic new courses available. We also have a membership program that allows you to participate in live events and community discussions. Furthermore, if you become a member, you can participate in one of our study groups. And if you're interested in one-to-one dialogue, I offer what I call meaning coaching. Finally, you can simply subscribe and like our YouTube channel or sign up for our newsletter to keep abreast of all of our activities. In any case, thank you in advance for any support or good vibes or participation in this project. And please join us and help us to rebuild spirituality, rethink philosophy, and reimagine culture.
So welcome everybody. It's so good to be finally gathering here. Welcome to all friends and new faces. I am Claire Molinar, the co-founder of the Unique Self Institute, together with Dr. Marc Gafni. And I am delighted to open this new series, a long-awaited first collaboration between Parallax and the Unique Self Institute. For the rest of the year, every first Sunday of the month, we are going to gather together with Andrew Sweeny, the wonderful and multi-talented podcaster, and we will be in dialogue with Dr. Marc Gafni to unfold the Holy Trinity of Homo Amor, Unique Self, and Unique Self Symphony, which are three core concepts at the heart of Dr. Marc Gafni's philosophy, also known as CosmoErotic Humanism. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce Andrew and Marc, for those of you who haven't met them. As I said, Andrew Sweeny is a man of many talents. He is a writer, an editor, a popular podcaster at Parallax, a coach, and a teacher at the prestigious Sciences Po University in Paris. He's a published poet and a professional musician and a long-term practitioner of Zen and Vajrayana Buddhism. Dr. Marc Gafni is a social activist and visionary philosopher known for his source code teachings on Eros, unique self-theory, and evolutionary love. He is the author of over 25 books, including the award-winning Your Unique Self, The Radical Path to Personal Enlightenment. He holds a doctorate in philosophy from Oxford University, as well as an Orthodox rabbinic ordination. Dr. Gafni teaches on the cutting edge of philosophy and spirit in the West, with the aim of articulating a new worldview. He, Dr. Zach Stein, and colleagues calling CosmoErotic Humanism. This worldview is based on first principles and first values, anthro-ontology, and the universal grammar of value, which becomes the ground of a new shared universe story and a new narrative of identity. A shared story that can serve then as the matrix for global ethos, for global civilization. Dr. Gafni is the co-founder and co-president of the Office for the Future, the Center for World Religion and Philosophy, the Foundation for Conscious Evolution, and the Unique Self Institute. At the core of their shared missions is the articulation and delivery into culture of a great library in multiple forms, which participates in evolving the source code of consciousness and culture in response to the meta crisis. Without further ado, I hand it over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Lirazi.
Hi there, everybody. Good to see you, Marc.
It's great to see you, man. I just want to just do a little check-in for 1 second, which is just so you know, I hope that my internet will be good. I'm actually at my friend Soryu, who is the abbot of a monastery here in Vermont and who's become a dear friend. And we're working together and collaborating. And actually, Zach just left, Zach Stein, just headed back to the house. And they always tell you at a monastery that they have perfect internet, but those Zen people, it's never quite perfect. So we just did a broadcast now. So hopefully we'll be okay. And so if occasionally, I freeze, hopefully the voice will stay and hopefully it'll be totally fine. So that's where you know me, we're in a kind of different background. And that's just a little, house cleaning. And Andrew, I'm madly delighted to be here with you. Yay.
Yeah, there's a crack in everything, Mark, right?
Amen.
That's how the light gets in. Okay.
That's how the light gets in.
So so perhaps we could just begin with the title of the series, Love or Die.
Yeah.
And the fact that seem to be at a crucible or a crisis moment in culture and civilization, which you have diagnosed as a crisis of intimacy.
Yes.
So why don't we talk about that? Why don't we talk about love or die, and then we can get into your deep ideas.
Let's start there. That's a great place to start, Andrew. And I just want to just say about this series, I'm excited to do it. And, our intention here, if we can just set an intention, or I'll set it at least for myself and intuit that Andrew will participate in it or set it, independently, but in the lineage that I was trained in, which I still practice. I practice in multiple lineages, but still have an original kind of mother's milk, if you will, which is the Hebrew wisdom lineage. Luria says in the 16th century, l'shem yichud, for the sake of making intimate, all of the fragmented pieces of the whole, and bring them together into union. And so our conversation is not just wisdotainment, everyone, right? But our conversation is to create more wholeness, right? To create more wholeness in a world that is not omniconsiderate for the sake of the whole, in a world which is breaking apart. So we're here in a kind of radical moment where we're confronted with this love or die moment. And I'm going to just maybe say a word about that as you asked, Andrew. I just got an email, my friend, from a dear old friend of mine for the last decade, a guy named Brad Blanton. I don't know who knows Brad Blanton. It's called Radical Honesty, one of the defining books in kind of the culture of America in the last 40 years. Anyone know the book? I'm just checking in. Anyone know the book Radical Honesty? Anyway, so I won't have time to look at the chat box. It was a fantastic book. And he wrote me and he said, I saw this dialogue you're doing on love or die. And he said, I think you need to change it to love and die. And he forwarded me a video by another colleague of mine, Michael. And Michael and I have talked a bunch of times, Michael Dowd. And Michael is what I would call a doomer. Michael believes that Michael wrote called Thank God for Evolution. He was a radical optimist, back, 10, 12 years ago. And at a certain point, he kind of came to the conclusion that there's no way out, right? And that, we need to love, but actually there's no way out. We're going to die, right? That actually there's no way to actually step beyond this meta crisis. And there's a growing community of doomers. Joanna Macy, I can go through a list of people who've actually joined that community. And so the first thing I want to say is an utter rejection of that position, right? In other words, there's a paradoxical materialism which says that prior causes, right, determine the future, and that when a certain set of causes, right, are set into play, there's really nothing you can do to change them because the human nature will always default to its lowest common denominator and will keep exponentially reproducing the conditions of breakdown until in this moment of global civilization, where we haven't solved any of the prior problems of global civilization combined with exponential technology, we're going to die. That's the existential risk scenario. But they're framing it, and Brad Blanton writes me back. He says, don't call it love or die, call it love and die. I mean, even though we're going to die, let's still love. And so I love Brad, and, my friend Michael, with all due respect, that's a huge mistake, because it's actually the ultimate denial of spirit, right? If you would ask me what spirit is, Andrew, I would say that spirit, or like you put, a gun to my head and say, okay, you got 10 seconds to live. Give me a good understanding of God in 10 seconds. Hope you don't do that, by the way. But if you did, right, and I had 10 seconds left, I would say God is the possibility of possibility, right? Infinite possibility, right? And the same infinite possibility of Eros, right? That is the initiating energy and Eros of the Big Bang itself, the great flaring forth, which generated all the reality that exists today, and which moved in an evolutionary love story to keep deepening and deepening the field of intimacy, right? Evolution is the progressive deepening of intimacies, more and more complexity, more and more consciousness, more and more intimacy, more and more creativity, more and more uniqueness. And all of that's at play. And there's a subtle materialism in both Michael's work and Joanna Macy's work, right? In other words, when you get under the Gaia, there's this sense that it's just antecedent causes, right? And everything is strict antecedent causes, and for ultimately there's no free will. And there's a kind of subtle reductive materialism in the doomer community, right? In much of what I would call kind of the classical, in America, you would have like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Sam Harris, there's a whole in Israel, Yuval Harari, right? The World Economic Forum, the MIT Media Lab, right? There's an entire community, which is quite intelligent and wonderful human beings, would love to have dinner, but there's a subtle materialism which basically says we're fucked one way or the other, right? And so we'll keep performing, but actually, there's a kind of inevitability, right? That it's going to, in some sense, go down, and that's not true. And so love or die, by itself is a huge statement. And what we're saying is that actually the way that we love, both individually and collectively, and the way that we tell the story of reality, which is what we're here to do, right? And the way we articulate this love story actually can change the vector of history. So that actually it's not just an intellectual exercise, it's an existential exercise that we're engaged in. Can we actually identify the narrative arc of history, show that reality really is a story, that story is real, that story is a story of value, and that actually that story is an evolutionary story which evolves to higher and deeper levels of consciousness and intimacy? That's everything. So I just think our title is actually paradoxically an enormously hopeful title. It's filled with.
Well, it gives us a choice, doesn't it?
Right.
Whereas love and die is incredibly deterministic,
right.
And we seem to have this choice in every moment. This is kind of a choice we always making, whether to embrace existence or fall into a nihilistic rabbit hole.
Right. Right.
So,
No, absolutely. And actually you said, I mean, maybe to get started, or we've already started, but you and I had talked about this a little bit, which is how we got to this title. And, we had emailed a little bit. So I know we didn't prepare this before. So I apologize if this is inappropriate, but I'm going to do it anyways. Right. Which is, you wrote a song, right. Which is a love or die song. So I thought maybe as we're starting this love or die series, right. And, Claire already said that Andrew's a man of many hats, right. And I don't know if he has his guitar anywhere near him.
I can't do that. I can't pick it up and play it. I need to rehearse it. It
needs to rehearse. Okay. So next month.
Okay. Next month I will do it. Next month. I need rehearsal time to get it and I need to memorize the words and all that, because I haven't played it for some time. But I will play it for you guys next month. I will do that. Yeah.
Okay, so one second. Let's go to the chat box. Let's all find each other in the chat box for a second. All right. So does everyone witness to that? Everyone witness, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Give a yes if you want to hear. Give us a yes if you want to hear Andrew next month with Love or Die. Give some yeses in the chat box. Yes, live, Love or Die next month. Yes, Andrew, you're on. You got a big month.
I'm on. Yeah, I'm a shy performer, but I'll do it for you, Mark, for sure.
All right, we're on. See, Andrew wrote, actually, friends, he just wrote, and I'm going to turn back because he's the moderator, but he wrote a beautiful song, right? Love or Die. And I actually got to hear it. It was recorded. So we're on for next month, and maybe he's going to play us a recording, but maybe we'll get him to do it live. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think that's proving your point, really, Mark, is that a popular song, like it's a song, and I think songs tell the truth. And I think if you can write a song with a chorus that says love or die, then that must be true.
Right.
Whereas if you wrote a song called Love and Die, it wouldn't really work as a song, would it?
It would not work as a song. And maybe that's a good place to not to start. We're already in, as I said, but the very energy of excitement to hear a new song and the generative possibility of disclosing a new melody and cosmos as you did and as you do as a songwriter is the possibility of possibility. That's exactly what it is. In other words, we are, and I'm not going to go into the science of it right now, but we are music. Music comes into being with sound, and with the intervals between sound is the constitution of music. And we literally, in our bodies, we literally are music, which is why we respond to music, right? Music lives in us, right? Music is the quality of the intimate universe. And that a new song is generated tells us that there's new possibility. And it's just extremely important. In other words, we have direct, when Claire read her introduction, which I appreciated and only my mother believed, but she used the word anthro-ontology. And anthro-ontology, right, is the answer to how we know what we know. Right? Andrew, is that a fair way to say it? It's the question of epistemology, is how we know what we know. So how do we know what we know? Because it lives in us. Anthro, right? Human being, anthro, right? Ontology, for realsies. So anthro-ontology means the mysteries are within us. They live in us. And so when a piece of music emerges from me, right, that's a piece of truth that's emerging from me. It's a quality of intimacy. It's a quality of the feeling tone of cosmos. It's a quality of love, right? It's a love song of some kind. And the universe feels love, and the universe is music, and the music is love songs. And so love or die means that we die if we don't write new songs. If we don't write new love songs, meaning we don't disclose new structures of intimacy.
Yeah. It's interesting. Leonard Cohen said, sorry to interrupt. Leonard Cohen said the song is a crisis. So it's a crisis, meaning that is the crisis. You have to write the song. You have no choice, right? Like the way you have to give birth or yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
No, that's gorgeous, right? In other words, the song is a crisis, or the song responds to the crisis. Something breaks open, right? A crisis means something's broken.
Yeah.
Something's broken. There's a break at the heart of reality, right? And as you began, that's where the light gets in. That's where the song is written. And so I think we just need to, and this is really important to my friend Brad Blanton and to my friend Michael Dowd and to Joanna Macy and to the kind of intrinsic, kind of sense at the leading edge of intelligence. And I think Barack Obama participates in this. And, I could list, 50 public figures that actually are participatory in different ways in this kind of subtle undermining of the Eros, or the love story of reality. So when I say, for example, Atlantic Magazine is a famous magazine in America, Andrew ran a cover story a couple years back in which positions that the university has expressed in philosophy courses, as one possible position, have moved to center stream. And the cover story was, is free will real? And the basic point of the story was, no, it's not. It's like, wow, right? It's like, wow. Now stay with me for a second, right? Free will is only not real if you understand that reality is only matter. If reality is only matter and not what matters, right? If reality is made up of matter, but not made up of what matters, right?
Yeah.
Then matter is based on antecedent causation, right? And so there's no choice. But if reality is made up of meaning, it's made up of song, it's made up of music, right? It's made up of eros, right? So eros is not reducible to matter. Eros is what matters. It's a field of meaning and a field of value. And precisely the paradox of a human being, and this is what it's core to the Hebrew lineage, but it's also core to, let's say, the Hermetic, right, tradition that Marcello Ficinio, right, found so critical in the, the Academy, of Plato in Florence, which is that the human being is paradoxically speech and silence, matter and what matters, the upper worlds and the lower worlds. And there's a dimension of the human being that's not reducible to antecedent causation, right? The human being is possibility, because that's what love is. When I fall in love with you, and then, turning back to when I fall in love with you, I'm filled with possibility. Right? We fall in love and we're like, oh my God, everything's possible. Because love is the experience of the divine, which is the experience that everything's possible. There's newness, there's novelty, right? There's new possibility. And so we can't look down. We can't take a doomer position of looking down. We have to look up, right? And we have to actually hold an energy of vision and of possibility, because it's really, and maybe the last sentence in this, our beginning here, our mood is everything. Heidegger, our dear friend Heidegger, got so much wrong, including Nazism, which he got too involved in a horrible way. But Heidegger got something right, which was mood. That the mood of reality. So we have to change the mood of reality. And you change the mood by telling a new story, but a real story, right? A story of value. So that's what I'm really excited to do with you. And that's what love means today. Love means today to tell this new story of value in response to the meta crisis. And we can actually love and live. And we're not just before a dystopia, but we're also poised before an unimaginable utopia and an unimaginably beautiful world like that.
Yeah. That's very hard for people to hear, right? Because there seems to be this all-pervasive doom and gloom in the culture. And you are counteracting that with an optimistic type of story. What do we like? What do we do with all of our dystopian suffering and terrors, and because we are being given images of that are being streamed live into our brains, 24/7, the horror and the terror. And that was my first thing. And also I was thinking about, and you talked about matter and spirit, and there's also the idea, there's also the machine, right? Gurdjieff said we're machine man. This is when we are caught in this mechanistic view of the world. So, matter is beautiful. Matter and spirit should be a unity, I would say. But I would say it's the machine that is the danger at the moment, especially in the world of AI. Sorry, that's a long rambling kind of reaction to what you're saying, but
let's work with it. Okay, so let's split into two. So one is, there's no room for naive Pollyannish optimism. That's one, right? So when we say optimistic, I'm not optimistic in a kind of naive Pollyannish way. In other words, a decade ago, when no one was thinking about existential risk, I turned the entire weight of my own personal energy and eros and that of the think tank, the Center for Integral Wisdom, to engaging existential risk. At a time when really, I remember at a board meeting literally 10 years ago, I think, Claire, you might have been at that board meeting, right? Where I asked everyone to read a book by Ramiz Nam called The Infinite Resource, which dealt with existential risk. And I thought that Ramiz, who's a good man, he kind of suggested that there was a machine solution, right? As you would put it, right, to all of the issues. And it was clearly not the case. And so we put existential risk at the center of our conversation. everything we've done at the think tank since then is to actually take existential risk enormously seriously, right? You know, again, for years when no one even knew what we were talking about, and then from that place to respond to it. Okay, so that's one. So I just want to just start with that. So there's no Pollyannish optimism. At the same time, there's an enormous sense of hope and possibility, right? Because hope is a memory of the future. That's what hope is. It's a memory of the future. So we can actually articulate a memory of the future. And when we articulate a memory of the future, we realize, or let me say it differently, and that memory of the future doesn't emerge from an impartial cosmos. The cosmos is not impartial. The cosmos is partial to Eros. The cosmos is partial, right, to creativity. The cosmos, it's partial, right? In other words, impartial means it's neutral cosmos. No, the cosmos is not impartial. It's not an impartial cosmos. The cosmos is partial to love. The cosmos went from, you know, quarks to culture, right? From, you know, mud to Mozart, from bacteria to Bach, right? From, you know, just utter, you know, devastation, right? To unimaginable, you know, dignity. And so the cosmos is going somewhere. There's an intrinsic storyline. There's a plot line to cosmos. And that plot line isn't exhausted within one lifetime. It's over many lifetimes. It's not exhausted, Andrew. I think this is critical, brother. It's not even exhausted in one dimension. It's not a one-dimensional cosmos. We need to, right? Multiple dimensions, right? But within multiple dimensions and multiple lifetimes, there's a clear storyline. There's a thread, right, in cosmos. And that thread is for more and more value, and for more and more Eros, and for more and more depth, and for more and more goodness, and more truth, and more beauty, right? With all of its distortions, there's a very clear telos, right? More freedom, more consciousness, more elegance. And so I think we need to hold that really at the center of our conversation, that our optimism is not Pollyannish. And at the same time, we reject a kind of Cassandra-like doomsayer. Rather, we say love or die. What we actually say is, actually, we're in the Anthropocene. We're today at the very center. And actually, our choices are going to create the future. So that's an incredible, unimaginable position to be in, filled with poignancy, filled with power, filled with pain, filled with peril. But that's where we are, and we can be in that together. So that's just to beginning to respond, you know, to your thoughts, to begin to kind of we're beginning to create the context for these conversations. Yeah. Can you feel that, my friend?
Yeah, I've been digging into your older books, Radical Kabbalah, and I think that's been your position, kind of all along. That it's sort of against religious determinism, and you called it in that book a cosmic humanism, I believe, and now you're calling it CosmoErotic Humanism. That is sort of that's a heretical view almost in many religious, you know. I was talking to Claire before the thing about how this is heretical in the religious orthodoxy, this view, and that's so interesting, and why it would be that way, why people would need this deterministic view, you know, why people would not want to accept that kind of a freedom that you are pointing towards, or that perhaps the early Kabbalists were pointing towards.
Well, let's feel into that, right? In other words, basically, it's a great inquiry. So first off, just for those of you who are not familiar, and not that you should be familiar, but if I can share tenderly, right? When I was at Oxford, I wrote a bunch of volumes called Radical Kabbalah. 2 of them are published, which are tracing a very, very deep lineage. Actually, one of the ways I met Zach Stein is that my friend Ken Wilber, I sent him like a 1,000-page version of this. I'm back in 2000 and something, in 2000 and maybe, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, or 5, something like that. And Ken marked it up. He read it all in 3 days. And that marked up copy, Ken's marked up copy of it, made the rounds of the kind of the kids back when Zach was a kid in Boulder. And that's how we found each other. But the implicit understanding of the interior sciences is a very particular understanding of the nature of cosmos. And maybe if we get to the core of this, is going to help us a lot. So there's 3 possible readings of reality, right? So one reading of reality is the scientific reading, in which reality is basically a series of facts, but there's no storyline. Right? The notion of there being a storyline is absurd. No, it's just a series of facts that are at play, and it's a set of mechanistic facts, and there's a set of laws at play, but there's no narrative arc. That's possibility 1. So there's no story. That's the scientific view. The religious view is also that there's no story, right? That actually this world is called in all the traditions in one way or the other. I think this is what you're referring to, Andrew. This world's called a prostor, right? It's a hallway to the next world.
Yeah.
So
John Vervaeke calls it a 2-world mythology, right?
Okay, so right, so it's that's this world's a hallway. We're going to the next world, which means that the architecture of this world doesn't matter much. It's the city of God, right? It's the shining city of the hill, which is the next world. And this world is the place in which you're tested, you're challenged, etc. That's so in both of those positions, right, which are both true but very, very partial, they both ignore the intrinsic dignity of the narrative arc, the story of this world. And indeed, while theistic traditions talk about the next world, right, the Eastern traditions say move beyond your story, right, into the deep presence of the present, where some version of shunyata, right, of liberation lies. And there's partial truths in all of these, but it's not, you got to get underneath that. Underneath those 2 positions, there's a third, and actually I think embraces dimensions of the 2, but it's the most accurate and important understanding of reality, which is the reality is not merely a fact, it's a story. And that story itself, that reality is going somewhere, that there are plot lines to cosmos. The cosmos has a narrative arc, right, that is at the very center, first of our own self-understanding. Right, so I want to take this really slow here, because one of the great things about doing these dialogues, I hope, Andrew, that we get to go slow here for a second and actually go deep. And this is a very huge understanding. And you actually know that it's true even before you do any deeper work. You know that it's true anthropologically, because how do we experience our lives? We experience our lives as being a story. And the stories of our lives and the ups and the downs and the crisis and the betrayals actually matter to us. And they matter because story matters. So even before, I'm going to go deeper in this, and I'll turn it back to you before we go deeper into it. But right, the narrative arc of reality is real, and reality is telerotic. It's filled with aliveness, and it's going somewhere. And where it's going is it's seeking more value. Reality desires. Reality has appetites, and the appetite of reality is for ever deeper value. Now, just to get this, that's hopeful. That's what I meant when I said hope's a memory of the future, right? In other words, I'm not just my psychological self who's determined by yesterday. I'm not just, I'm in the Zen monastery, my kind of enlightened self, which is in the depth of the present, right? No, I'm called by my future self, which is the memory of the future, right, that calls me forth. And yes, I would just one minor emendation, just for the for the sake of all these dialogues, I'm drawing. It's not a question of the Kabbalistic master stretch, brother. I'm drawing on strains in Hebrew wisdom, but also strains in Vajrayana, also strains in Kashmir Shaivism, and also molecular biology, right, and also genetics, right, and also fields of anthropology. So we're trying to weave together a new story. So I don't want to limit it to, this is the Kabbalist view. What we're trying to do in CosmoErotic Humanism is take the validated insights of wisdom streams across time and across disciplines and integrate them into this new story of value that moves us to love and not to die. So that's
well, the word tantra means to weave, doesn't it? So I mean, this has always been the case in the wisdom traditions, I think, is this weaving together of, we have this sort of illusion that there's this tradition and this tradition, and that they're homogenous in some kind of a way, but they're not, right?
Beautiful. So let's weave, brother, right? So maybe and I'll throw it, let me just throw this on the table in the weaving, right? Which is, if we can land one thing today, we're talking about this in One Mountain, maybe in the coming weeks, but is that story's real. And I want to kind of get that story's real. We were talking just right before this in One Mountain, we were talking about, those of you who were there, we were talking about Tolkien, who's trying to revalue cosmos, right? To restore value in cosmos. And the way he does it by setting up this anti-value position, which is the ring, which is precious, right? The precious ring means it's anti-value. Right? The ring destroys value, and you have to destroy the ring, and you destroy the ring through the fellowship of the ring, which is the reclaiming of the field of value, the field of Eros. Now, and I'm not going to, for those of you who are here at One Mountain, I'm not going to repeat what we did an hour ago, but just to say one thing, Tolkien tells it in the form of a story, because story is a structure of reality. And that's why I want to focus on this idea that story is a structure of reality. And that actually, that the story that lives in me participates in the larger story of reality. So in other words, the same plot lines that drive the story of cosmos drive my life. Now, that's very exciting, because that's participatory. I participate in the field of story, right? And the field of story has identifiable plot lines. And those plot lines are the first principles and first values of reality. That's a lot of mouthfuls, but in other words, without these, we can't even move. We can't actually address the meta crisis. In other words, what we're saying is story has a narrative arc. One, the narrative arc is story desiring to fulfill value. That's always how story works. Story is not mechanistic. Story there's some freedom of choice. There's desire for value. And there's a plot line of events that are intrinsically correlated and connected to each other, causal to each other, in which we try and advance our desire for the fulfillment of value. That's what a story is. Now, if you understand a story from that perspective, so there's a story at the world of subatomic particles, right? In other words, there's actually a direction, there's a plot line, there's inherent allurement, desire. The desire is for the fulfillment of value. The value is always a larger Eros, a fellowship of the ring. Subatomic particles come together as an atom, right? And so there's actually a story. I had a long conversation with my friend Howard Bloom, who's considers himself an atheist. He's kind of like the guru of NASA. He's a brilliant scientist. And I actually unpacked with him these dimensions of story. And we agreed that this notion of story is intrinsic to cosmos all the way down, right? And as even the world of the atomic and subatomic world, there's story. So story is always evolving. It's always present in reality. Now, if I get that, and I get that it's a story of value, and I get that those values are the plot lines of cosmos, then all of a sudden I have room for enormous optimism, because cosmos is moving somewhere. It's moving towards goodness. So it's moving towards truth. So that's our structure. That's the structure I want to just introduce as kind of, this is where we are. This is what we're talking about. Take it away, sir.
Well, I was just thinking as you were speaking, the difference in stories and the stories that we are kind of subject to. If we engage in popular culture, we have many dystopian stories or negative stories, and then the older stories, the biblical stories, or the deeper stories, or how would you characterize, let's say, the right kind of story? Because if we have value, we have to say this story is the right kind of story, and this story doesn't lead to anywhere. It's kind of a snake eating its tail.
I love that. I love that. So in other words, you're asking the postmodern question. I mean, I hope everyone gets Andrew's question. Andrew's asking, if I can speak about you in the third person for a second, right? The ultimate postmodern question, which is, all stories are made up. That's the assumption. So how do you know which story you choose? Okay, so we're saying exactly, of course, the flip opposite of that. I mean, it's deep and it's beautiful. In other words, Derrida says all stories, it's Derrida and I and Foucault agree on one thing. It's all story. That's what we do. And that's actually postmodernism God, it's all story. So that's correct. And I'm completely aligned with Derrida on this notion it's all story. But here's the difference. For Derrida, there's no hierarchy of stories. There's no better or worse stories because
No value.
Because there's no meaning. What actually we're saying, based on direct realization, not based on dogma, but based on a direct experience of reality, direct realization, we're saying, no, there's a plenitude of meaning. There are infinities of meaning. And because there's infinity of meanings, right, there's on the one hand, a shared story of value, but that shared story of value is a context for diversity. And that diversity can be 1,000 different stories. But underneath the 1,000 different stories, there's a shared story of value, meaning there are, and let's get this right, there are better and worse stories. And that's unimaginably important. And actually, everyone on this call knows anthropologically that that's true. So if I decide to have an intelligent conversation with Andrew, where we're honoring each other and we're loving each other and we're seeking value together and we're seeking gnosis and we're trying to be two proximate experiences of uniqueness, finding each other and synergizing into a new story of value. And you can feel kind of honor and respect and love at play. That's one way the story of this call could happen. The other way the story of this call could happen is we could start insulting each other and start doing this kind of strange, kind of argument and kind of go kind of off and be rude and be impolite and, take it in an entirely different direction. That's a different story. And it's self-evident to us that one's better than the other, right? Why? Well, because the first story is aligned with a set of values in Cosmos. And we actually don't think, no one thinks actually that those two stories are equal. And actually, when Andrew Sweeny looks at his life, it's very clear to him that the more love and the more integrity and the more goodness and the more value is in his life and the more contradictions can be embraced and transformed into paradox and the more deepening and the more discernment, the better the story. So we actually, and this is the funny thing, we actually don't think that all stories are equal. Actually, Foucault didn't think all stories about his life were equal, nor did Derrida. Right? Nor does any, right? In other words, actually, we all know intrinsically, anthropologically, there are better and worse stories. And that's a very big, so one, stories are real. There's a narrative arc to Cosmos. Two, there's stories that are aligned with Cosmos, that Cosmos is partial to. And there are contrived stories that distort the plot line of Cosmos. So for example, the story that says that all stories are made up, right, is a dogmatic claim, which actually violates, right, our sense of meaning in Cosmos. Right? Yeah. That's a big deal. So we get to say that there are better and worse stories.
Yeah, I think there's a hidden perversity in not embracing that.
Right. Right. That's right. There's a hidden arrogant perversity.
Yeah.
Right. Which no one actually believes. And yet there it is in culture in every magazine. But actually, there's no one who actually believes it. Everybody knows in their direct experience, right, that actually there are better and worse stories. But what's happened is we've devalued our direct experience.
Yeah.
Right. Because we've actually reduced reality implicitly to being just matter, in which the storyline no longer ultimately matters. And so we literally need to reclaim our location in the Tao, right? Our location, and by Tao, I mean the field of value. We need to relocate ourselves in the field of value as the context for our diversity. Now we're beginning to tell an important story. And maybe last sentence, and back to you, Andrew. Now, I just want to get how important this is. You know, in COVID, I don't know if you were tracking this, there was a column, I think it was in the New York Times, where they would, you know, everyone was doing interviews from their their homes. And so often you had your backdrops. That became a big issue. What's your backdrop? And I don't know if we mentioned this in one of our dialogues, but this really struck me. So, Jeff Bezos did an interview, and his backdrop was Yuval Harari's book. There were 2 books on his shelf. One of them was Yuval Harari's book, Homo Sapiens. Barack Obama, right, endorses Yuval Harari's book, Homo Sapiens. Bill Gates says, "Oh, Homo Sapiens, fantastic. That's a book that's what I'm thinking." In this book, Homo Sapiens, right, and in Homo Deus, what my friend Yuval says, and Yuval and I are from the same hood in Israel, and I'm delighted to have Yuval over for dinner, right? And Yuval's position, right, as a parrot of culture. Yuval's a historian, not a philosopher, but he's parroting culture, right, as a good raconteur. But his basic position is values completely made up, A. 2,
Arbitrary,
arbitrary, right?
Yeah.
Value is fiction. He uses 3 words: fiction, social construct, or figment of our imagination. Those are the 3 words, chapter 2 in Sapien and chapter 7 in Homo Deus. Same basic version, right? Now, and then you've got these, but forget about Yuval. Yuval's just a kind of mirror into culture. But then you have Obama and Gates and Bezos saying, "Oh, this is great." Now just imagine 60 years ago if an American president endorsed a book that said there's no field of value. I mean, we got to get that this conversation we're having is not abstract. Now, the reason Obama did that was because his assumption was that, values are basically made up by human beings. And I like my set and you like your set, but ultimately, only dogmatic, retro-regressive fundamentalists can claim that value is real and any value is better than any other value. That's the assumption. Since we don't want to be that, our only other choice is there's no field of value. That's not true. So what we need to do is actually articulate this new notion.
So is this an ontological issue? Is this a problem with people's being, or is it an intellectual error? Is it? I've often wondered if these guys need to dance more or something. It's a question of like fragmentation. It's like people are living in this technical, intellectual mode, and I think of Gurdjieff talked about the 3 brains working together and the unification of those things being the experience of the divine. And often you feel that these things are working in separate realms from each other.
Yeah,
making sense?
Yeah, no, you of course you're making sense, my friend, right? And let's see if we can find it. So why would these people reject the field of value when in fact in their own lives, right? I'm sure Barack would do anything for Michelle, right?
Yeah.
And for Tasha, right? In other words, so clearly in their own lives, they're standing for value in some real way, and yet they reject the field of value, which then undermines culture itself. Because the assumption is reality is impartial, right? And when reality is impartial, you can go very quickly from that to Brad Blanton, who writes me Love and Die, right? Because the antecedent causation, right? And Barack is reading the literature, some of the themes I've already mentioned, including Harari. Harari has another chapter in his book, There's No Free Will. Homo Deus, free will is made up, right? And that any intelligent person needs to understand that free will is made up and endorsed by Mr. Obama. That's shocking. So why have they, what's forced them into that position? So I think this 3 things.
Well, I was thinking it's like ideological possession, almost egregores that just possess people. So they believe in things that they don't believe in.
That's right. At the very center.
They become voice pieces for collective opinions, good opinion. It's also good opinion. It's because they don't want to go against the people around them that believe the same thing.
So there's all of these things are at play. I think all the factors you point to are at play. And I think at the core of it is there's a legitimate, appropriate rejection of the old systems that said the old systems were in the pre-modernity, in the traditional world, were win-lose metric, system against system, which every system said our values are the best, you're a suck, and we're going to kill you so that you adopt our values. So that was the Western Enlightenment rejected that, and properly so. But what the Western Enlightenment failed to do was was to then say, okay, but underneath all that, there's a shared field of value. And the reason the Western Enlightenment didn't do that is because the assumption was, and now we're going to get to the heart of it, is that values are eternal. And values are eternal, right? That was what everyone kind of assumed, right? Eternal value, eternal love. And then people said, well, but that's not true. Right? Eternal means it's always there and unchanging, but actually that's not true. Evolution. Values are also always evolving. So values are always evolving. They can't be eternal. So for example, love, right? Love, eternal value. Oh, no, but that's not true because love meant something 2,000 years ago. It means something completely different today. So today you can be arrested, right, and sent to jail for slapping your disobedient wife, as you well should be. You should be sent to jail for a decade, right? But 2,000 years ago, if you only slapped your disobedient wife and didn't, right, punish her more severely, you were madly loving. And we call both of them love. Yeah. And that's the point made by people like Howard Bloom and the Lucifer principle, and Howard's a dear friend. So Howard's point is, so love's made up. That's not real. You're calling it love, right? But the same word love applies to contradictory actions, right? They're completely understood in radically different ways. So that's a summation of the reason Barack Obama rejects value. Now, is he right? And the answer is, right, true but partial. But he's assuming, and this is such a big deal, he's assuming love's therefore just made up. That's not true. Actually, the eternal Tao is the evolving Tao. In other words, eternity doesn't mean unchanging. Eternity means intrinsic value, which is not everlasting time, it's beneath time and space. What Wittgenstein says, he says eternity is not lots of time, eternity is beneath time and space. And beneath time and space, there's a field of value. So love means something. Love means the best sense of care, empathy, concern, and honor that's available at this moment in time in history. And actually, so love's real. It's the real structure of cosmos. Eros is the animating force of the four forces, and love evolves. So we can. That's a big deal. That's everything. If we get that, Andrew, like if we land that in culture, I call that evolving perennialism. That's the name.
Evolving perennialism. Well, I was thinking about it's like this is how we marry the Platonic ideals with process philosophy or something like that.
That's a gorgeous way to say it, my friend, right? That's Plato meets process philosophy. Exactly. So Plato meets Plato plus process philosophy equals evolving perennialism.
And maybe the existential mistake was to just throw away all the ideals and say they're all bullshit.
Right. That's right.
They're just not real.
Does everyone get what Andrew just said? And it's exactly right, right? So process philosophy is this notion of this unfolding in time, right? This unfolding of depth. And Plato's ideals are these unchanging eternal ideas. But actually, and they both reject each other. But actually, you need to marry them because no one's smart enough to be entirely wrong, right? So you got to take Plato, eternal forms, goodness, truth, beauty, process philosophy, right? This evolutionary movement in which we participate, right, in the creation of value. Put those together, and you have this notion of value that's real. There's a real field of value, and yet values evolve from within their own intrinsic parameters. Now, here's the crazy thing, my friend. This crazy thing. All of Hebrew wisdom is based on precisely that notion, right? That actually there's an eternal law and the law evolves. So I just want to just show something that this is kind of crazy. Go back to, I don't know, Egypt. Go to Egypt today. A friend of mine, Aubrey, is just actually coming back from Egypt today. He was on the Nile for a week, right? So nothing in Egypt today has anything to do with Egypt of 3,000 years ago, right? They're just no connection whatsoever.
That's gone. Yeah,
it's gone. But those crazy Hebrews,
they're still around. They're still hanging around.
They're doing the same thing, and they're still in their lineage tradition. So what? And Dalai Lama asked me this when I was in his back room in Dharamsala. What is the secret of their eternity? Right? I mean, the Babylonians rise and fall, and the Romans make this large noise, and they disappear, and the Assyrians, right, emerge, and then they're but a puff in history, right? And yet there's this eternal notion, which is this Hebrew wisdom right? So what's the secret of their eternity? And that's Mark Twain's question in Harper Magazine at the beginning of the 20th century. And this is not that doesn't mean the system's the only system with wisdom. Lots of systems have wisdom, but there's a particular notion here that we need to actually borrow to kind of articulate a new universal, a new world spirituality, which is the notion of eternal and evolving value, right? In other words, there's an eternal word, logos, grounded in a field of value, and yet the sages participate in the field of real value, and they participate in its evolution. And lest anyone here thinks, oh, this is a theoretical, weird conversation that I'm in, who the fuck cares? Is actually the single most important conversation in the cosmos today. Is there a field of value? And we've rejected the field of value because we've posited a contradiction between eternity and evolution. And literally, a friend of mine, shall remain nameless, who's this is literally true, he's a well-known professional athlete, and we do Holy of Holies together. And he just said to me that he's a quarterback, right? That the coaches called him in 2 days ago, right? Major sports team. And they were arguing about the contradiction between eternity and evolution, literally, right? Right? And we had literally this, I swear this, we had a Holy of Holies. And he said, let's talk about this eternity and evolution thing. And the coaches said, there's this contradiction between eternity and evolution. And that contradiction lies at the heart of a broken culture. Actually, there's no contradiction. Actually, right? Eternity is not evolution. Eternity is always evolving. There's no contradiction. There's eternal truth, meaning truth that's beneath time. And that truth that's beneath time, the truth that lives in the silence, gives rise to the speech which is evolving. So, I mean, the realization that the eternal Tao is the evolving Tao, that there's no contradiction between eternity and evolution, is the beginning of actually creating a new ground of value, which becomes the animating slot lines of the new story of value.
Yeah.
So our ability to construct a new story of value depends on this understanding. And Obama's not a bad guy. Jeff Bezos is not a bad guy. These are good guys, right? Yeah. Bill Clinton's not, some demonic, maniac, although I know that there's conspiracy theories abounding claiming otherwise, but I don't think that's right. I think that basically, and I've spent thousands of hours looking at this, that basically, Clinton, right? Obama, right? The World Economic Forum, Pentland at the MIT Media Lab, right? The whole gang are at the center of culture, right? Sam, their basic assumption is we're not doing the regressive thing. Those were the value people. Our only choice, therefore, is that value's made up. It's only a material universe. It only is matter. And so therefore, right, we live in an impartial universe, right? And existential risk is real. And we got to make the best moves we can in terms of infrastructure and social structure to change things. We're saying, no. No, we live in a field of value. Value is always reaching towards more depth, right? And value itself is the possibility of possibility. And therefore, we can participate in that field like Da Vinci did, right? In Florence, and Facinio did, in a time between worlds and time between stories. And we can get together here in Parallax with the center, and we can actually tell this new story of value in a super serious way that actually takes root in culture. And we're here to try and work this out together, to talk back and forth, to work this out, right? To articulate, to clarify this, and then to actually download this new possibility into culture. It's a big deal.
So what came to me is, and thinking when you're mentioning all these people, there's the materialistic view, right? Which is fundamentally, we just have one life and it's all made up, and you just do what you can and have the best life possible, etc. And that's no wonder people are depressed with that sort of a view.
Right.
And then there's a kind of a dualistic view, right? So the dualistic view where there's this world is sort of a passage to another world. And so I think that there's sort of a Gnostic dualism that's one part of the sickness. And the other part of the sickness is people don't have what my friend or one of the Buddhist teachers I like, Tinley Norbo, called multi-lifetime view. Like, we're not seeing things in a field of multi-lifetimes. We're seeing this short, brutish little life, and that we just have to act within that for better or worse.
Yeah, it's subtle, right? Because we want to avoid the classical religious position, which is, again, this world is, right, but a hallway, right, to the next world. So we have to take this world seriously, and we have to take the narrative arc of this world seriously. We have to take our participation in shaping and being the story of transformation seriously, A. And at the same time, we have to understand that no one lifetime exhausts the story. So that actually the story of fairness and the story of goodness and the story of truth and the story of beauty is only partially available in this world. We're filled with, right? Literally in this moment, I'm filled with joy talking to you. So joy is right here. And, I had a dream last night. I had like a very intense hour dream in which I felt colors talking to me. I could literally hear the colors talking, and it was clear that every color was just another quality of loving, right? That color itself is just a form of love. That's what color is. It's a way of loving.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
we're right. The world is filled with, trillions of cells talking to each other and fields of intimacy interpenetrating and interconnected with each other, in which everything is non-locally connected. And who would have thought that this year's Nobel Prize was for non-local connection, right? This is not What the Bleep, physics movie of 20 years ago, right? This is the Nobel Prize in physics of this year is about, moving forward, right? The truth of non-locality, right? Hot damn, right? So as the world's filled with wonder, with taste. I mean, I ate lunch here, and the taste just blew me away. And Suri and I hugged each other, and we had that moment. And so we're filled with goodness, and yet we meet death, and we meet unfairness, and we meet injustice, we meet horrific pain. And so it's absolutely true that the world is both outrageous pain and outrageous beauty, and that the storyline of reality cannot be exhausted, right, in the period of one life. So we need multiple lives to get a sense of the vector of the love story, A, and we need multiple dimensions, right? So the love story is a multi-dimensional love story, right? And it's a multi-lifetime love story for sure, right? And the claim that death is the end of the story, right, goes against, and I think maybe we have to do an entire dialogue or two just on death, but it goes against a massive amount of empirical evidence, a massive amount of ontological evidence, and a massive amount of philosophical evidence. So we can leave that, but death is a night between 2 days. Death is a chapter in the story of life. And that's critical to understand, without which there's no conversation. And Harris assumes, right? Gates assumes, right? Obama assumes that that's not the case, right? In other words, they've actually dissociated from the field, right, of evidence, right, that empirically, as William James calls it, radical empiricism, right, actually understands that immortality of some form is part of the structure of reality, and that's critically important. That's a big deal. Yeah.
Immortality is part of the structure of reality. Maybe you want to expand on that a little bit. That's quite a sentence.
No, it's unimaginably important. I mean, here, let's see if we can get direct access to it. Okay, so now there's 3 ways into that door, right? One way into this door of kind of, Jung said, correctly, and Jung was a complex figure that we won't go into now. That's an important conversation. The Red Book, some of those important books written, Jung's Red Book. But for now, Jung says that, he says, I can't create psychological stability in a client until they have some direct lived access, right, to the fact of immortality. Pretty stunning sentence, right? Yeah. Pretty stunning sentence. And I think that's absolutely true. I think part of our, there was a shooting in the United States this morning. This was
another one, hey? Yeah.
199th shooting this year.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And
it's the ultimate despair. It's unbelievable. And you can't even think of anything almost worse than that, because they're going to shoot young people in schools. It's the ultimate horror of anti-life.
Every several days in the United States now, somebody, I mean, let's just understand where we are.
Yeah.
Someone picks up a gun and starts killing people.
Yeah.
For no other reason than an affirmation of the utter meaninglessness of the whole story.
There's no
Right?
value in life whatsoever.
There's no field of value,
Yeah.
right? Right. I mean, that's really what it's saying. There's no field of value. The field of value is not real in any sense, shape, or form, right? And so life, death, they don't matter. There's ultimately no distinction between them. And this brings us to the second point. We actually know that that's not true. In other words, and it's a gorgeous pointing out instruction. Maybe we can do it here together. It's deep though, if we have energy for it. And I'm assuming we'll go maybe about 90 minutes. So maybe we got about 20 minutes. I'll just take 2 minutes of that to just try and grab this. So I think all of us on the phone have access, right, to justice, to fairness. That fairness is a real thing. Justice is a real thing, right? There's an enormous amount of developmental literature which talks about fairness being a cross-cultural category, right? And Zach, my friend, Holy of Holies initiate, Zach Stein has done a lot of work in this developmental area. So fairness is a cross-cultural category. Reality should be fair. A. B, we also know that within one lifetime, for most human beings, reality is not fair. That's B. Right? So how do you put those two together? I say, if you know that reality should be fair, we have an intrinsic sense. A child screams, "Zelo fair," my son would say in Hebrew. It's not fair. And it was an appeal to the shared language we all have. It should be fair. Anyone who has kids has had that experience. And we've all had the experience in our life where we're outraged at the deception, at the cheating, and at the lack of fairness, at the injustice. So we have this intrinsic anthropological knowing it should be fair. A. B, we all have direct access to the empirical truth that for most people in most lives, it's not fair. So how do you put those two together? So that leads you to the anthropological truth that the story is not over at the end of the lifetime. Meaning there is a story. The story has to ultimately be a story of justice, but that story is not over at the end of one lifetime. How do you know? Well, because you have an intrinsic knowing that it needs to be fair, and you know that it's not fair at the end of one lifetime. So Mother Teresa dies and Hitler dies. And we actually know intrinsically, right, that it would be unfair. It would be a travesty if the next stage of both of those journeys were the same, A, right? And B, if there was no existential, ultimate intrinsic implication that emerged from those two different life choices. We wouldn't say, oh no, that's just antecedent causation, right? Neither of them had any choice at all. So they die, it's over, and none of it mattered. No, our entire beingness rebels against that. And that beingness that rebels against it is the voice of she telling us, no, fairness is real, right? Fairness is part of an ultimate narrative arc of cosmos. And it's not over when it's over. The story goes on. You have direct access to it. I was just, Andrew, at the deathbed a few years ago of my dear friend, Barbara Marks Hubbard. And I remember just watching her there on the bed, right? We had just left One Mountain, right? Our weekly broadcast. And I had called her right before the broadcast, and she gets on the phone, and she had an incident 2-3 hours before. She was at the hospital, and she says, "Mark, this beautiful, gorgeous voice." And then she dropped, right? She fell into a coma and died, not a long time later. And I flew to the hospital afterwards. We thought she would wake up. She didn't wake up. And it was so directly clear to me that Barbara hadn't disappeared. It was self-evident that Barbara-ness wasn't gone, right? Barbara-ness clearly wasn't residing, but this wasn't an intellectual experience. It was a direct, realized, lived experience. She was in the middle of her story. She was in the middle of a sentence. And that sentence will be completed, and we'll all be together again, right? And there's a narrative arc. We know that. We know that fairness and justice isn't exhausted and that the story goes on. So that's critical. We need direct, so we have anthropological access. We have direct knowing that it's not over.
And all of our ancestors are speaking through this, right?
It's beautiful. And all our ancestors speak to this. Do you remember, if you remember, brother, they just did #2 of it. Remember the movie Avatar, right? They just had Avatar 2, James Cameron. It's going to be with us for the next decade, Avatar, right? There's going to be, right, Liberace, like 5 more avatars coming up, right? So we're in the world of Avatar, right? And so in the first Avatar, there's this sexual scene. It's one of the most beautiful sexual scenes in movies, of course, between 2 blue bodies, right? Who are the Na'vi, people, on the planet of Pandora, and Jake Scully, who's, enters into a Na'vi body and falls in love with Neytiri. And in their sexual scene, they first go into this, place of the Tree of Souls, and they tie their braid, right, to the braids of the tree, and they hear the voices of the ancestors.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They hear, is just what you were just alluding to intuitively, and they feel the aliveness of it all, right? They feel this moment beyond death. And it's from that place, from this wider field of sensuality, this wider field of Krishna and Radha, this wider field of she, that they then turn to each other. And in the scene that they cut, but you can look it up on censored scenes, the scene that they cut is that the way they make love is they put their braids together in the same way, so they're connected to the field. And from that connection to the field, they make love, and their love is participates in the entire field, which is what lovemaking is.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Because we often think of love making as just an activity between 2 human beings, but again, you're pointing out that there's another dimension to that, which we can notice.
And so when I'm in love, right, and I remember John Donne, right, the English poet says, "Come, my darling, so I may die with you, so I may die with you," right? And so it's this or orgasm as a little death, right? It's this death to the smallness of the separate self, in which I enter into the larger field of Eros. But and here's the gorgeous paradox of sex. It's why sex models the erotic. I both die to my
I don't know if it's me, but you're cutting out there a little bit, Mark.
You're cutting off, Mark. Can't hear you anymore.
We lost you a little bit.
Oh, we lost him completely.
We lost Mark in his, he was having an orgasmic experience and he disappeared.
Yeah, it was too much for Zoom.
It was too much, I guess.
Okay, everybody. Well, let's just take a few deep breaths and maybe take a glass of water or stand up and do a little movement while Mark is coming back online. Sure, he's going to reset his internet. He's at a monastery today, and as often, here he's back.
There he is. I think Mark just had a little death that he had the little death that he was describing.
It seems like he's having a hard time coming back because he's not making it all the way. Yeah, no, he dropped again.
He dropped again. Hey, oh, shoot.
Well, let's see.
Well, hopefully you can come back so we can conclude the conversation, and then you could.
There we go.
Oh,
you're back.
We made it back. Sorry about that. We just got a little. We were in mid orgasm there.
Exactly.
Yeah, you had the little death. That's what we were saying.
Right in the middle. Yay. So we'll just maybe hold there, right? It's just this notion of the field of immortality. That's the last sentence that's available even in sexing. You actually have this feeling that you disappear and that you appear. You've actually accessed this field of immortality. That was the end of that sentence. Right. Thank you for your patience, everyone.
Well, maybe the thing that does die,
You want
right,
to take
is the ego or something, right? Just the last comment, because bringing it back a little bit to the beginning.
Yeah,
Um,
totally right. The ego dies, the small self dies, but the larger, eternal, unique Eros that to me is born. It's why in sexing with total Eros, I disappear and appear at the same time. Right? I both become absent and I become more present than I've ever been in the same moment. Because I've entered into this field of immortality like that. Like that.
very good. Very
Yay.
beautiful. Hmm.
Do you want to, Andrew, and you and I didn't discuss this before. I know we've got about 10 minutes left. So do we want to take any questions in the chat box? Or
Yeah, I think we should. I think that'd be great.
So
I think that'd be great. Yeah. I think it'd be great to
Is
bring
that
in somebody
okay?
else. Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
It's a
and
pleasure.
maybe we got like 10 more minutes. So how would we do this? Maybe put in the chat box a little Kirsten, a
You
little
can
Zoom
write
death
in the
we have.
chat box, or maybe you can raise your hand, preferably with the function, because we have two screens. It might be difficult to see if you raise your real hand, but if you can raise your hand or write in the chat box if you have any question.
Right. Awesome. You know, so Claire, you'll run this for us and tell us we'll follow your lead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I don't see any.
It's hard to see. There's so many people
Yeah,
here that it's
So
hard
many
to
people.
see
Maybe
if
just
somebody
write
had
in
a
the
question.
chat box.
Best thing
Easier.
would be just to indicate that you want to ask a question, maybe in the chat box.
Yeah, if there's a question. Yeah. Yeah. Whole bunch of comments, not really born, revisited.
One
Yeah.
I think. Oh,
No
there's a
question.
question. Raquel Summer just wrote something.
There.
Oh yeah, we have a question from Raquel Summer. Maybe she wants to. Maybe she
Yeah,
wants
we can
to.
read it.
We could read it if
No, we
I'll
can
she
read
wants
it.
to jump in. Okay.
take it away, Claire.
Okay.
Raquel is wonderful.
Raquel is asking, one expression of what justice means might be an eye for an eye. What would be a more evolved expression of that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And that's one great question, right? And what's the relationship between another question, Marjorie? So let's take each of them, and maybe we could each just look at it for a second. But before we handle these couple of questions, and I know we've just got a few minutes left, so I just want to just check in with everyone just for a second, if I can, right? Andrew and I. So just everyone got a feel for the conversation, right? So did everyone just, if you felt a yes, right, to this kind of real open-ended exploration, trying to, these next, 10 months, trying to reconstruct the story of value, give us a yes if this is, if this feels like it has value to you in this engagement that we're in, right? So just give us a right, right? Just so we can kind of feel each other. Is that a yes? That this is worth doing, and this is valuable, and we can feel the yes in that. Beautiful. And if anyone has any recommendations for things that you want us to address, right? So thank you for the yeses. That's actually enormously helpful and gratifying, right, for Andrew and I to know that it's valuable for us. And please, if there's particular things, we're going to try and, over these next 12 months, we're going to try and talk about love or die. That's and we got a performance that we're starting with next time, right? We're going to hear love or die from Andrew, but we're going to really be in this conversation of love or die. That's going to be our conversation. We just got started. And so if there's a piece of this conversation you think that we should be having that we're missing, please tell us, okay, it's really important for us that you talk about this, and and to come with questions, and we'll be in touch with everyone, to send questions before. So let's create this together. Let's actually create new knowledge together. Like things clarified for me, Andrew, today, and expressing them and in hearing you and in inquiring together. So we're really at the edge of culture, and we want to tell this new story together, not as another wisdotainment possibility, but as a kind of revolutionary possibility. Let's articulate this new story of value together that becomes a ground for us. So that's crazy exciting. Okay, so thank you. So Raquel asks a fantastic question, which is, what's a more evolved notion of justice than an eye for an eye? And here I think there's something important, right? Which is, justice means that I want to be complete with reality. So if I steal something, I have to return it because something's gone wrong. If I caused hurt, and I need to create forgiveness, and I need to ameliorate the hurt. Right? And so what all of that assumes is that there's a field of value, there's a field of fairness, there's a field of goodness, right? That always needs to be restored, right? If I meet Ujis in the street, right? Ujis, it's so, right, good to see you. If I meet, right, if I meet, anyone in the street and I say, oh my God, right, I haven't seen you for such a long time. And we give each other a hug, but then we rush on and don't ask each other how each other are. Oh, there's something wrong with that conversation. I need to find that person later and say, oh, Mom, I'm so sorry I was running so fast. Let me find you and really find out how you are. Right. So there's a right wholeness to reality, which is when the moment is loved open and we let the moment love us open. And when the pregnant moment births its full possibility. So that's the best possible scenario. That's the better world. That's the most good, true, and beautiful world that we can live in. So justice means that anytime we didn't live that fullness or we violated that fullness, we want to make it whole again. That's what justice is. Justice is something got broken, we want to make it whole. And so in that sense, justice is radically optimistic. It's not punishing. It's not punishment for the sake of punishment. It's like, no, there's a debt. Let's pay that debt to the moment. Let's pay that debt to each other and be whole again and be full again. And as justice means, it can always be set right. It was unjust, let's make it just. Right? There's nothing that can't be set right. There's nothing that can't be fixed. There's nothing that can't be made whole. So that's the promise of justice. Justice is the opposite of a kind of eternal damnation. You didn't believe in the right dogma, you're damned. You're not part of the right religion, you're damned. You did something wrong, you're in hell for eternity. No, justice. We can actually set it right. We can create wholeness. We can create shalom. So I think that's a powerful notion of justice. It's radically hopeful. We can always make it right. Andrew, do you want to take that question in any direction, sir?
Yeah, I guess an eye for an eye would be the opposite of that wholeness, right?
Yeah.
It would just be creating more emptiness, more suffering, more devastation. So I think what you said was very true and beautiful, that it's this making whole business. And that's really been the essence of our conversation, I think, and I've been feeling the whole way through, is this movement towards making whole and unity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. No, it's beautiful. So maybe we'll end with Marjorie's question. I saw Marjorie's question here before. And Marjorie, I want to.
She just wrote it again, Mark. So
thank you. Yeah, in our news story. So you want to read it for us, Lirazi?
Is our news story in part a response to our survival instinct and or fear of death? In the expression of good, true, and beautiful, how can we allow the bad, false, and ugly? Is this a question of transcend and include through process of alchemy and transformation?
That sounded like 3 questions there, Marjorie. You're a rock star.
He is.
Okay, that's awesome. A lot of questions in one question, but let's handle at least. I want to honor everyone in terms of time, and I think we're going to go about 90 minutes, friends. So let me just try and handle one part of it, Marjorie. Those are all fantastic questions, but let's take the beginning. Is our news story in part a response to our survival instinct and or fear of death? And I think the implication of that is it just a survival instinct, right? I mean, it's not that there's a real ontology to story. It's just a way, it's a method of surviving. And so this is really, really important. This is one of the deceptions of language. In other words, evolutionary psychology has reduced so much that's good and true and beautiful in people to a survival instinct. But it's a language deception, because what's a survival instinct? Survival instinct means I want to live. That is not a materialist mechanistic structure of cosmos. The desire not to die, even when I'm severely wounded, I don't just die, I struggle for life. That's Eros. That's what a survival instinct is the radical desire to live. We reduce it to a survival instinct as if by calling it survival, we made it mechanistic. That's utterly not true. The survival instinct, which is the desire for life, is an inherent telos in reality. It's completely non-materialist and it's completely non-mechanistic. Isn't that wild? And actually, if you think about it deeply, my desire for my survival, right? So virtually everyone on this call thinks about their own survival, thinks about their own betterment. So that's not an egoic expression. It's actually, survival is actually self-love. Survival means I love myself. What does it mean to love myself? I perceive my value. Does everyone get that? Right? Self-love is the opposite of narcissism. Narcissism is I loathe myself and I cover that up with narcissistic play. Self-love means I actually have a perception, a sense of my own value, and therefore I want to perpetuate it. So what they call a survival drive as a kind of closet dismissal of Eros and depth and, spirit is actually wrong. No. Survival means life. And the desire for my life to go on comes from self-love, which means I have an innate, intrinsic self-knowing of my value. That's a big deal. Okay. So the telling of a new story isn't a survival value in the sense, oh, we're just surviving. No. The telling of a new story is the movement of life. It's the very movement of life tells the story, because the movement of life is a movement towards more and more depth, more and more creativity, more and more uniqueness, more and more transformation, more and more value, ever deeper conversation, ever deeper goodness, ever deeper truth, ever deeper beauty. These are the vectors of reality's first principles and first values, which are the plot lines of cosmos. And that's what's so important. That's what we mean, what Andrew and I were talking about today, that story is a structure of reality, which is gorgeous. Right. So maybe we'll hold, and there's a lot to, and Arca, thank you for your comments, and thank you everybody. And, I'm excited, at this kind of first conversation. And next time, again, we're going to send everyone an email with, the subtopic, love or die, the subtopic. Please write questions and let's make this ours together. Let's make this ours together. And I'm looking, right, Annis with the M. I'm going to try and do my hair that way, my friend. That's that's awesome, right? That's my boom, right? So it's great to see everyone. It's great to be together, right? And Andrew, thank you for this gorgeous place and hosting. And I can't wait till next time.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much, Mark. I feel like there's about 100 threads that I would like to pick up on with you next time. So that I guess the best kind of conversations open up an infinite field of potential, to use your
gorgeous
your words.
Gorgeous. And we need music at the end, don't we? I know usually we need some music. We don't have any. We'll have it for next time.
Yes.
We'll have it for next time. But yay.
Totally.
Yay. Thank you, everyone.
What a great
Claire.
start, Mark and Andrew. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Just
everybody.
wonderful. Great start. And see you all in 1 month, June 4th. Have a good evening. Good day. Yay.
Amen.
I'll be the music as we get off the phone. And Andrew's doing the real music that's on tune less time, but I'm going to chat while we get off just so we can enjoy together. Bimba imbandina na na hey immananda hey immananda ho bimmananda hey immananda ho Himmararanda hey hey hey, himmararanda hey ho. Himmararanda hey hey hey, himmararanda ho ho. Himmararanda ujase bimbarinda hey ho. Bimmararanda hey hey hey, himmararanda ho ho. Himmararanda hey hey hey, himmararanda ho ho. Thank you, bum 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 bum. Harimanaranda hey hey hey, Harimanaranda hey hey hey, Harimanaranda hey hey hey, Harimanaranda hey hey hey, Harimanaranda ho ho ho, Harimanaranda hey hey hey, Harimanaranda ho ho, Nimanaranda hey hey hey, Harimanaranda ho ho, Harimanaranda hey hey hey, Harimanaranda hey ho. Dimmanaranda hey hey hey, Rimmanaranda hey hey hey, Rimmanaranda hey hey hey, Rimmanaranda ho ho.